Mr. Post.
I worry that equity is a squishy word, a buzzword that we throw around without really meaning what we say. I'm going to offer an amendment which I believe fits with the principles of equity. After we reviewed this policy in committee, I thought about it and reflected on it and came to the conclusion that I was very uncomfortable voting for a policy that suggests all factors should be weighed the same way in a school boundary decision. I can't pretend things like long-term stability or geography are the same level of importance as diversity. Racial and socioeconomic diversity by every metric, I believe, are more important. Students need to learn in schools that are rich with different backgrounds, different cultures, and different perspective. You know, as we discussed earlier, and as I was talking with Dr. Daka, it's been 64 years since Brown versus Board, 63 years since Montgomery County voluntarily integrated, and it's only been 3 weeks since Linda Brown, who was at the center of the Brown versus Board case, died. We still have not adequately addressed integration in Montgomery County. When it comes to the demographic makeup of our schools, we only do marginally better than the already flawed demographics of our neighborhoods that surround those schools. And while we do have a quality integrated education policy, that policy only concerns quality education when schools are already integrated. We have to take a first step, which is actually integrating the schools, creating policy that creates the conditions where the integration of schools is at the forefront and a priority. And then we can talk about next steps in ensuring quality education within those schools. Personally, I believe this policy should include a full-throated, weighty prioritization of diversity over the other factors. But I understand that there is concern on this board about doing that, about unintended consequences with doing that. So I'm going to put forward a very simple compromise solution that only strengthens the policy's language and emphasizes diversity. Doesn't full-throated prioritize it over the other factors, but lightly emphasizes it. So on page 16, starting on line 438, it currently reads, options should strive to promote the creation of a diverse student body in each of the affected schools. I move that we amend the existing language to say options should especially, comma, and in particular, comma, strive to create a diverse student body in each of the affected schools. I'm asking for 3 words and a couple commas.
What line did you say?
Starting on line 438.
Say it again. Option should what?
Option should, especially, comma, and in particular, comma, strive to create a diverse student body in each of the affected schools.
Ms. Ortman-Fowles?
To me, that's where equity hits the road. The rubber hits the road right there. And in addition to the numbers you just gave, I think it was 247 years of slavery, 87 years of lynching, and our schools are getting more segregated by race and income, not just here, but across the country. So we were saying this morning that this is a time to take bold action, and I think we need to sometimes get people out of their comfort zones. And our job is to make sure every child gets the best education they can, and we are to see every policy. I think ACA, I actually added this language that we should judge every policy through an equity lens, and we know that children do better in diverse environments. All children do better in diverse environments. So I think that should be the priority because that's our goal. We did make a decision as a board in a boundary study that left schools with a 7% to a 70% farms ratio in a district of 5 schools within 4 miles of each other. I just don't want to see that happen again. I was at a school recently that has a 4% farms rate, somebody just emailed me from a school that has a 90% farms rate. The experiences are different for kids in our schools. Just a quick thing about the school that I was in was 4%. Among the many things that were different, they had a 1.2 staff person in the cafeteria. And I said, wow, your lines must be crazy. And she said, oh, no, kids just wait a couple of minutes because most of the kids here bring their own lunches because the kids there aren't dependent on school lunches. And one of the letters that we got this morning, we got some great letters from kids, and I really hope everybody read those letters because they just really moved me. They were very powerful. And one of the letters said that this was a student who was a student of color who was living in a Habitat for Humanity house getting food stamps. And his parents thought it was better. He had moved there, but they coasted him back to the school that was not diverse. And how isolating that was for him to be in this environment that was not diverse as a person who was living impacted by poverty. All children benefit by being in diverse environments, so I do want to second your change.
So, Matt, I can support the strive to. I think that language gives room because it's not, an absolute number. It's not an absolute, it is. I think we should strive to create diverse schools. And so I think that language, I can support that language, that addition.
So say what you want it to be.
Didn't you just say, with the language you gave.
Especially.
In particular. I would just do it as strive to.
I would just
Could you like say the whole sentence? Because I'm.
Well, actually,
It's there. Options
48, but lose your line.
should strive.
should strive to create diverse.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just want it to be the way it is. So you would be against
Strive to promote.
I think strive to promote. I think strive to promote would be. I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
my amendment was to change it to options should, especially and in particular, strive to create a diverse student body in each of the affected schools.
I
especially to
don't think.
promote. Yeah.
I think strive to promote. Yes.
Ms. Dixon?
Well, I agree with Mr. Post. I think that we shouldn't leave it so much to chance in terms of striving to. And I wonder as well whether, where we have all of the demographic data showing the impact of various options include the following, whether we should also add educational load there as well.
What does that mean?
Can I just add
Ms. McGuire.
a couple of clarifying notes? The elements that typically make up that designation are intended to be laid out here through the language of participation in specific educational programs and also through socioeconomics.
Okay. Well, we
so
can
we were
leave that.
trying to
We
break
can leave
those
that.
out. If I just could add, just as context to your conversation about the factors, the intent in having the factors in connection with the options is that both when staff puts forward options, staff would be developing options that advance each of the factors and also a blend so that there's a range of options that reflect a priority from each of the factors as well as whatever blends can reasonably be accomplished in that range of options. And that is an intent to just reflect how each of these factors could be prioritized and what options would look like under each of those scenarios to present a full range for deliberation and for decision making.
So, looking at this, I mean, if you took out the words "when reasonable" and just began options should promote the creation, as opposed to.
I think you're looking at an old. We
Oh.
removed where reasonable.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, if I could offer a point of clarification just to kind of make sure that the record can reflect the amendment. As I understand it, we're looking at attachment A, the committee recommended draft. Starting on line 438, it would read options should, and then the words that would be added would be especially, comma, and in particular, comma. It picks up the rest of the sentence, strive to. Then you would strike the next 4 words, promote the creation of, and substitute in its place create. So it would read, options should, especially, comma, and in particular, comma, strive to create a diverse student body in each of the affected schools. Is that correct, Mr. Post?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Strive to create versus strive to promote the creation. Are we splitting hairs?
I think so,
The-
a little bit. I think the way he had it initially was
Yeah.
better.
So
Options should especially promote the creation of a diverse student body. We're being very clear that that's what we want it to happen.
Yeah, no, that
You
the-
wanted to take this out.
You didn't want to take
Options
strive,
should
it's just
especially
not special.
promote the creation of a diverse student body.
yeah, and in particular,
Drive, but leaving in strive to, but I,
No, he wanted to take that out.
it is what my amendment was options should especially and in particular strive to create a diverse student body in each of the affected schools.
So what are the 3 words you added? Especially and in particular?
You
Yeah,
added some more then.
4 words. My bad.
4 words. Especially
okay.
in particular.
I don't think it's.
And deleted 4 words.
So it all evens out.
So you deleted words?
Well, just to make it grammatically make sense.
Ms. Nixon?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I think especially is important
Ms. O'Neill?
that we want to do that.
I'm not going to support.
Okay. Let me just ask you this, Mr. Post, because I think I understand where we're going, and I think we're more on the same page than not. But help me out as to how you see this becoming operational. So X school is going to be built, and as you see it from what you just suggested and what we've discussed, then what happens as that school is going to be populated by somebody?
As we start the boundary study, diversity is given slightly more weight than the other factors when coming up with options to be presented before the board.
And how does that address some of the comments that our colleagues have made in certain parts of the county where there's minimal diversity?
There's always going to be difficulties with that, which is why the language about striving to is still in there. It's a little bit of equivocation because there are parts of the county where you can't create diverse schools. But again, this is the line. This line is the one of our schools as they exist right now between the minority percent in each neighborhood and minority percent in the schools. And this dotted line is the line that would exist if people just went to the closest school. So we are doing almost nothing to integrate schools beyond the existing demographic concentrations in the neighborhoods. I think we need a change of ideology when it comes to boundary studies if we are ever going to actually get to a point where our schools are integrated.
Mr. Mandrowski?
I think Dr. Jocko might have been.
Yeah.
I
I'm
don't know.
sorry.
Operational is the word that I'm concerned about because I know I talked with Mr. Post about this earlier. I don't know how it would be operational to do this. We're trying to fix the housing pattern by fixing our schools.
Right.
And it's always left up to the schools to do the changing, to do the training for ethnicity and rightness. It really isn't our job to do that. Our job is to really educate the kids wherever they are. So I really can't agree with that. And I know that you're passionate about it and other people are too, but I do not see, I don't want to mention the name of a school, but a school, elementary school, that only has 4% or maybe 1.5% free or reduced meals, sending their kids over to the school that has 50 or 60%. I just don't know how we can do that. And earlier we talked about the 70s when we did try to do that. We did it with Rosemary Hills, Bethesda, North Chevy Chase, and there may have been one more school. And also on the east side we did it with East Silver Spring and a couple of other schools to balance. It really was white and black because at that time we didn't have very many Latino students coming. And that just sort of dissolved. People did not really want to do it. They did it. But as soon as they could get out of it, they did. And it did not correct anything. And it did not improve the scores of the African American students.
Ms. Mandrowski?
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo Dr. Jocko's comments. I mean, I feel like what you're referencing is a housing issue and then a demographic of where our populations are concern, and it's definitely a concern for all of us. But to expect that we would have communities that can't go to, we talk about the importance of community schools, and we talk about how important it is for not just our students but our families to feel connected to their school and to be a part of it. And when if they can't get there, or if they're going past a bunch of other schools, to divvy up demographics and socioeconomics and those other things, I think that you're going to find a great disconnect with a lot of our families on both sides of and I just, as I'm listening to communities advocate for the fact that they want to go to the schools near them, and if we're going to be building in their neighborhoods, I would hate to think that that's not relevant, or it wouldn't be as relevant or as important to us as a board as to every other aspect of what we take into consideration when we're both building and boundary studying.
Ms. Mondrowski, Ms. Ortman-Faust.
That we have talked about doing interest-based programming in the future for schools. I think that's a way that could happen, and I'm supportive of that. And like I say, I can't even tell you, my kids went to very diverse schools. My daughter's a freshman now. My son is in a very diverse school. It has benefited them tremendously. And it's a disservice to our students who don't go to diverse schools. They don't get the same exposure that I think they need to be great leaders. I think they're losing something.
Dr. Smith?
You can't to me like.
I have a slightly different perspective on this. When we think about our most recent boundary study, the board had asked that we come back with a variety of options, and we did. And actually, you could have chosen any one of them, those you wanted. So I don't think the words change what the board can choose. My concern actually is quite different, having spent 3 years working for the state of Maryland, in that those words then would shape the decisions of the state board, regardless of what you did. I just worry that they would use that to overturn decisions that the board was happy with, the community was happy with, everyone was happy with the decision, and someone would challenge it and say, you didn't especially and in particular show striving to do this. So I just think it might limit you, is my only fear. I don't have any strong feelings about not doing it, but I thought I ought to share that perspective because, and we have lawyers sitting in the room so they could talk about the law, but I had the benefit of sitting in closed session for 3 years with the state board. So that's what I would point out in listening to them.
So I'm not going to support the amendment with that language as is, but I do believe, we should continue to strive, and I believe that options that come to us and the regs need to include that, that we have options reflecting, our desired outcomes of having a diverse student body, and that we always get that demographic data and the racial and socioeconomic data is always available, and that multiple options should always be given to us. But I don't know. I have that in particular. I have a problem. I feel like it's just it's superfluous words.
Ms. Dixon?
Well, I think it's superfluous words to say that we support this, equity and diversity as well. I want to choose my words very carefully here. What we did with RM5 in Twin Brook Elementary School and all of that, we had the opportunity to set those boundaries, and we didn't do anything. I thought actually that initially that we should have sent those recommendations back to Dr. Smith, but we were interested in meeting a deadline in terms of when we were going to do this work and so forth. And very frankly, yes, we do have housing patterns that are aided and abetted by realtors and different parts of the county as well. But I do think that when we say that this is a goal and we have the opportunity to do something about it, I think we should. And we're just maintaining the status quo. And, and I still am offended about, these idea about, sprinkling kids around and so forth. We're not sprinkling anybody around. It's about giving students opportunities. And it does make a difference. And I think it's something that we need to work on as a board. And I think, we need to have some language that will back that up. I don't think that it's going to hurt in any way to have that language there, to indicate that we would like to see more of that, more integrated schools as opposed to the segregated schools that we have.
Mr. Post?
Let me address a couple things. We cannot create diverse schools that reflect the demographics of the county everywhere.
Right.
It's impossible. I'm not trying to suggest that.
Right.
But there are places where we can and where we're not. And that's where we need to be focusing on. And this is particularly acute at the elementary level because we have so many of them and there are so many lines. There is empirical data to show the benefit of integrated schools. This is not anecdotes. This is not conjecture. This is not a value thing. This is about improving students' academic and social performance. And finally, probably the last thing I'll say is that I heard a couple times that the problem is with housing and it's not our responsibility. We can't control housing. So therefore, this problem is not in our hands. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? There was a Bayard Rustin quote earlier today which I really resonated with me. It said, the proof that one truly believes in action, or the proof that one truly believes is in action. We can talk about equity, we can opine about the civil rights movement, we can quote our favorite parts of Dr. King, but if we ourselves do not take this opportunity to ensure the integration of our schools, what does that all mean? It really doesn't mean a whole lot.
I just want to go back to something that Ms. Ortman-Faust said. I think that you are unusual parents to want this kind of diversity and have your kids go, and because of your attitude, they're doing well. But we don't have that many parents who would really do that, who would move from, and I didn't say sprinkling. I don't know whether you thought that I said that. But moving from the west to the east part of the county in this way also. I just don't think we have parents that really will do that.
We're not asking them to do that.
You're not,
Judy.
but you got to.
No.
There's no room for them to stay where they are, or to go over there and nobody else comes over. I just don't see how we can do it.
Ms. Ortman-Faust?
I know so many parents that choose this. So many parents that describe when looking for colleges who've said to me, I mean, a whole lot of parents have said they're looking for diverse colleges for their kids because their kids have specifically said they grew up in diverse schools and they are looking for diverse colleges and they're extremely disappointed. And one of my neighbors said, it's like diversity is their oxygen and we're sending them to colleges where they're not going to get their oxygen because the diversity isn't there. So I think there actually is a whole lot of parents out there that believe this. And I am going to pull my favorite quote because Martin Luther King quote, because we were talking about beloved community this morning, and I pulled this up. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. So as humans, we thrive in a community held, honored, and supported. When we know people different than ourselves, we discover other ways of being. Our horizons expand and life becomes richer. We do benefit all children by putting them in diverse environments.
Ms. Dixon?
No, I'm going to turn this off now because you could probably cook something.
Okay. Dr. Daka.
I think, okay. Right now, we're working on GT courses and getting home schools for the kids rather than sending them to centers. So it's kind of diametrically opposite what we're saying here today. We want them to be able to go to the schools in their neighborhoods if they want to have advanced classes, which we have not been doing in the past. So, we just have to make up our minds one way or the other.
last comment, I do think that when you create more diverse schools across the board, it does improve the schools themselves, so all children benefit. And the neighborhoods benefit as well.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on Mr. Post's recommendation. Do we need to read that again?
Just read it again. Just read it. Yeah, just read it again.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I'm going to have it memorized for you. Options should especially and in particular strive to create a diverse student body in each of the affected schools. I say again, I'm asking for 4 words and 2 commas.
Hold on, I have a comment.
Ms. Evans?
Yeah. So, I get what you're saying. I wanted to. I don't know that this is how we go about it. I feel like the conversation should be about boundary changes. So I feel like what I hear you saying is that every time we go to build a building, then we need to take a look around as to what kids we're going to pull from other schools in order to make sure everything is balanced. Is that what you're saying? Am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
That's one interpretation. Just generally, when we go about doing boundary studies, that we have diversity on the forefront of our minds, that it is a light priority for us.
And so it's not a priority if we don't put especially and in particular.
Well, I worry that this board might prioritize it, but what about the next board or the board after that? This is why we have to write things down.
I think we need to keep what Dr. Smith said into consideration as well, though I do think that that's something that could end up happening. I can already think of 2 communities that would challenge
I
us.
can tell you, if the board is pinned down by equity and demographics, I'm happy with pinning the board down by that.
Okay, we have a Ms. Dixon.
Weigh in here as well. When we have the opportunity to create more diverse schools by boundaries, okay, like we had that opportunity with Richard Montgomery, number 5, then I do think that we should do that. I don't think that we should continue to create schools, because the schools are diverse. And those schools, the elementary schools in RM, in that cluster, were diverse. But we had one school particularly that wasn't, and we didn't even send any of those kids to the new school. We didn't, and I just think that was a lost opportunity. And very frankly, right down the street, not very far away, I don't know how far North Bethesda Middle School was, or some of the schools there were from Twinbrook. So,
Ms. Evans?
Yeah, I was going to say, instead of piecemealing it, we need to look at it as a whole, and that's just my opinion. What do you want to say?
When we did Richard Montgomery number 5, a lot of people around this table said, I believe in integrating schools, but to create policy through a single boundary change is not the solution. This is our opportunity to create a holistic policy solution to emphasizing diversity of our schools. I'll push back a little bit on the RM number 5 thing, because I think it is one case, but there were a whole bunch of factors around that case. There are 1,000, hundreds of similar cases with not the same confounding variables across this county, and we need to go into those with an emphasis on diversity. It's not just Richard Montgomery number 5.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor on Mr. Post's proposal. All in favor? Ms. Ortman-Faust, Ms. Dixon, Mr. Post, all opposed? Dr. Daka, Ms. O'Neill, Mr. Durso, Ms. Evans, Ms. Mondrowski. Dr. Smith.
There's actually a line in here that gives the board a great deal of latitude to do exactly what you're discussing, which I think is exactly what we need to do in the community, and that is on line 458. In addition, options should consider at a minimum not only schools within a high school cluster, but also other adjacent schools. And as I believe it was Miss Evans said, when we think about not just when we build a new school or build an addition, we can also think about this and should think about it in terms of leveling out not only the enrollment, but the diversity in a school, using elementary schools, because everyone understands that as the elementary schools roll up, our schools become more and more diverse. They're not, middle schools are more diverse than elementary, and high schools are more diverse than middle schools. But elementary schools are the most isolating because they're the smallest. But if indeed we're serious about this, what we'll do is embark on an effort to look at equalizing the enrollment to reduce a school that's 125% that is relatively near a school that's at 82%, but not in the same cluster. And that will be a great departure from the current philosophy and belief system in Montgomery County. And as I've said to you before, I will do whatever, we will administer whatever you choose to do and whatever you do, but it will require that we do that and that we look at it that way. But this little line right here actually has tremendous weight in it if the board chooses to use it. And I'm particularly pleased that it's in there because the very first fall I was here in the entire CIP process, that became clear that that was a problem that we have. And it continues to exist. So we have this conversation. As I said, I didn't have strong feelings about not putting the words in or putting them in, other than if the board would be giving up some of its autonomy, because the state board would probably hold those two words as very, very important in any decision you made. But this is a local issue that the board is entirely in charge of. And we better pay attention to it if we want to get to where you're describing, Mr. Post.
And we're going to be drawing boundaries very soon. We're going to have the Seneca Valley, Clarksburg, Northwest High School boundary issue before you know it. We're also going to have the Clarksburg Elementary School boundary, which I don't remember, when we drew the boundaries for Wilson Wims. I mean, it was based on geography. It's pretty, anyway, it wasn't, but it will, that the issues will rise again when if and when the Kelly Park site is built, and we're going to look at middle schools, because while I wasn't on the board when the boundaries were drawn for Forest Oak Middle School, I suspect that was one reason, for socioeconomic reasons, that those folks go to Gaithersburg Middle School as opposed to Forest Oak. And all of that will come about again, and those will be before you know it, we will have those boundary issues before us.
Ms. O'Neill, go ahead, Ms. Dixon.
I don't, just want to talk a good game about this. I would really like to see us do something about it, okay? Our schools as they exist are not what Dr. King gave his life for 50 years ago this month. And, to say that we can't do something because of housing patterns and, those sorts of things is just, to me, that's just status quo. Not looking at these things realistically. We can do something about it if we all sit down and work together and put our heads together. And if we say to the superintendent, we would like you to send us something that gives us these choices. And, I do think that diversity, going to school with students who are different from oneself, makes a difference in life. I think that, plus traveling, and having enriched opportunities are really important. I've seen those come true in my own life, and I would like to have that for all of our students. And I think our students who attend schools that aren't diverse, I think they lose a little bit. I really do. And I don't think it's about you know, whether kids are going to have play dates or, you know, it's going to take 15 more minutes to get to a school. I mean, this is all nonsense. It's nonsense. So.
Well, the board establishes the scope of the boundary study. And so as we take action to establish the scope of the boundary study, you know, what adjacent schools are included, it can be spelled out in that resolution. And Twin Brook, it was the board that added Twin Brook into the original. They weren't even in the recommended to be considered as part of the, and the board said,
It should have been.
well, and the
It
board
absolutely should have been.
adopted it to include all of the schools in the Richard Montgomery cluster, including Twin Brook.
It should have been. It should have been included.
We can establish the scope and establish a priority.
Will you commit to doing that?
When as I have,
Okay.
I have. I mean, I don't appreciate being accused of
No, I
something.
haven't accused you of
Okay,
anything.
I'm just
I asked
saying.
you if you would commit to that. Okay, thank you.
Let us, very brief, we need to move on with this. This is an important discussion, but I don't know if there is an end to it right
Yes, no, I agree. And I don't want to mourn this too long because what's done is done. But I think when the history of Montgomery County is written, this will be viewed as another missed opportunity to integrate our schools through policy. It's going to happen eventually. If not this board, then it will be another board. And I plan on having my kids go through this system, so I hope it happens pretty soon.
Okay. Ms. O'Neill, the